Mark Zupan. I'm president of Alfred University, and I'm here with one of our top seniors, Emilia Donenberg Smith, who joined us as a transfer student from a much larger place in Philadelphia. And how'd you end up on our shores? If you could recount that story.
Gosh, yeah. So I left Sibley University because I wanted to do a double major, but the double degree program there is a little bit more difficult to sling together because of the scheduling opportunities for the College of Science and Engineering and the College of Arts. And I also had spent 2 years working back at home, and I'd grown up a little bit. I had trained and passed the exam to be a firefighter, but I decided not to become a firefighter then. My home is the North Shore of Chicago also. So after that, I knew I wanted to complete my degree. I thought, I'm not going to be a firefighter. I'm going to complete my degree. And I knew I wanted to do physics, and glass art has been a passion of mine since I was 15. So I was looking for a place, and there's not a lot of places that have undergraduate glass in the world even, especially as art, not let alone science. So we can get to that in a moment. So I pulled up a list online that I found of all the different schools in the world that offer undergraduate glass art degrees. And then I looked all those up, and I found which ones also offer physics degrees. And after that, I got on the phone, and I got on my email, and I started reaching out to see the probability of me doing a double major there and making it work. And basically, there was one place around the world that was potentially going to work, which was in Australia, but it didn't end up working out because the program had just shut down. And when I ended up looking at Alfred, a former mentor of mine, Pearl Dick, I mean, she's still my mentor, but also a former boss of mine, Pearl, had mentioned Alfred. And I looked up Alfred and I applied. And one day I was sitting at my desk. It was actually during the pandemic, original lockdown, and I had a call from a random number, and I picked it up, and it was someone on the end of the phone saying, "Congratulations, you've been accepted to Alfred." And there were about 3 other schools in the world that I had applied to that I could actually perform this double degree at. And then I visited Alfred, and there were people kind enough with masks and staying social distance to show me the art school. And after that, I knew that this was going to be the spot to complete my foreseen program of study.
We pride ourselves on, among others, 2 other characteristics on our intersections, curricular to co-curricular, and living in a world of ands where you can mix and match different combinations. So we're so fortunate that ability to intersect between physics and glass, and you don't often see it, was what you're after, and your purpose in life, and what you've been able to do here at Alfred. And you were telling me earlier, too, that you recently were walking on campus and thinking through all the different buildings, and what I remember experience is your favorite word, or one of your favorite words. And so share some of the biggest beyond physics, beyond glass. You've also done a lot of other stuff as well.
Sure, absolutely. This place has become my home and my community in many ways. And I will also say that the faculty are very, very supportive of my double degree here. In fact, they go out of their way to make my life fit, my schedule work, my life easier. It's a real blessing that not only can I perform these 2 degrees, I'm also supported by my faculty. So I also want to give a shout out to Angus and Dr. Kirtland and Dr. Laux and Becca and Sarah, and I just really appreciate all my faculty for that. So let's see what other things I've done. I was a first-year experienced peer leader in the math program here. We did a math class for freshmen, and I kind of helped the freshmen get more comfortable on campus. I cooked some of them dinner, which also leads me out that I was being a big sibling in the honors program, which means you take on 2 freshman honors students and you kind of show them around campus also, talk to them about life, that life is hard as a freshman, and just know that it's going to get easier. What else? I'm a big active participant in the dance program. If I had more time, I would do a minor, but I didn't have time to complete all the requirements. But I've been in the annual performance for the past 3 years as a soloist and as a group participant in dances. Let me think.
You did a priceless play act with Peter Cuneo, our 67 alum who created Marvel Entertainment, where you dressed up as Spidey and had a dialogue, and that was just priceless for me. So thank you for helping us out with that.
Of course, I was also a tutor. I was a tutor in the Center for Academic Success for physics and I think math sometimes. I was a teacher's assistant for the glass blowing classes in the glass blowing studio for liberal arts class as well as in shorter glass. But liberal arts class was fun because some of the engineers that were in my physics classes were in it at the same time as me. So I was kind of connecting the physics and the art there. I've also had my math teacher into the glass blowing studio and showed her sort of the side of the glass blowing, and another math teacher's interested in visiting too. So I'm going to take Professor Lipnicki there, or she's going to stop by and we're going to see that. I'm trying to think what else.
Yeah, and it's terrific. And we mentioned intersections as being one strength of Alfred University. You talked about mentors and the faculty, but then also your peer-to-peer mentoring and how much that's allowed you to grow. And thank you for the impact you've had. And from what I remember, we had one of our top graduating students last year that your mentoring of her in glass blowing won her a major award in the entire state of New York. So
excellent.
Because she was, what I remember, he said she was anxious for a while, and your reassurance and how-to lessons really helped her blossom.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ade and I also pronounce Ade. She was in a bit of a maybe a vulnerable or uncomfortable state when I first met her here, being the only person of color in the entire studio. And it was really difficult. And I think with my background of teaching glass and being in more diverse studio settings, it was really a moment for me to show somebody that they're welcome and they should be able to feel comfortable regardless of the color of their skin, but also their gender. And I think now there's a lot more women in hot shops since I've gotten to be working in the glass blowing studio. And a couple of them have come up to me and also mentioned, that I made them feel comfortable, which is a real honor for me. And I think Ade and I, luckily, I think the hardest part about being a mentor is that it feels like there's some sort of dynamic. But at the end of the day, we really are peers as well. And I really look forward to growing with her in the glass world as an artist, but also honored that I got to help her along her path at one point.
What are the memories, fond memories of COVID? There aren't that many fond memories, but was walking on the quad and running into you. And I think you were practicing for your music class at the time. And it's always just been very uplifting. I know you decided not to be a firefighter, but you've stayed focused on fire. And the word incandescent keeps coming up every time you laugh. They have the opportunity to run into just the energy you bring and the joy to life. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and the local fire department here, I have sometimes going on to practices and taking calls, not as much as my degrees have gotten more intense, but I was a regular for a little bit there, which was also wonderful because I got to meet the local people that save people's lives around here, and that was also a real blessing to get to know them.
Last time we ran into each other, you were talking about all that you did over the summer. Just another example of vans between blowing glass in Murano in Paris, taking classes in Florence, and traveling through the Apennine Mountains. Just sounds like what a great way to spend 3 months.
Yes, that's a great thing you mentioned because also Alfred really helped me to take those opportunities. So Alfred, I applied to study abroad through Alfred, and I was also given some money from the federal Pell Grant. And then I used Apex the year before, but Apex is also a grant you can get to travel or to do internships. And so then I was able to study abroad, and I was in Florence, and I met other glass blowers. I met this wonderful art history teacher. One of my classes was on the intersection between brain science and art, and it was called neuroaesthetics, and that was really, really cool. And then I got to meet some people in Murano that offered me a job in the future, which was also thanks to the university program I went on, which is connected through Alfred. It's called Sarisa. And then after that, I came home. I stopped in Paris, also met a glassblower there whose conceptual work really aligns with physics. So that was a wonderful intersection for me. And then lastly, I went to the Carnegie Museum of Glass to help with the Bernstein funds. I got a 3/4 scholarship from Corning, then I got the rest from the Bernstein family to participate in a sculpture class that has changed my art forever. So,
It's you're going to be applying for a Fulbright.
yes, and I will be applying for a Fulbright in next year's round. So, about a year from now, I'll be applying as an artist with a portfolio for a couple different ideas, but it'll really depend on the mentorship that I can get accepted with. There's a glass idea, but also a writing idea for Paris, and then there's also somebody in the Czech Republic that I could potentially be sponsored by.
And from what I remember, the opportunity in Paris, the dream would be to write a children's book, female role models from different fields, especially in art and design or the arts in general. So fascinating.
Yeah, sure. I could talk a little bit about it and too about it.
Sure.
So the idea would be to read about and research multiple different women who have sort of cut their own paths in their field and made a difference in a way that, especially in the past, being a woman was a lot more difficult to have a career, be recognized seriously for a career and for work. And so the idea would be to sort of research them. And because I've been journaling since I was 6 years old, which is my favorite thing to do for myself, my favorite source of expression, I would actually end up creating these journals based off of their lives that then would be narrated in the book by a mother that would be reading to her daughter at nighttime before bed. And that way, the idea, and actually another student here in the glass studio mentioned this. She said something like, I used to be read to at night about either guys taking on heroic journeys or girls being princesses. But the idea of being read to at night about a woman that actually cut her own path and did something real is the girl could go to bed dreaming about what she's capable of and just let that subconsciously process rather than, wanting to be saved or looking at the guy next to you that's doing it. So, yeah, when I told my mom that, it brought me to tears unexpectedly because she did a Fulbright, and that's sort of how I was inspired to do it.
Promoting agency.
Yeah.
And very much in keeping with our third theme here at Alfred University of inclusivity. So you get so much more out of organizations, out of societies, the more inclusive you build your particular place. So.
Definitely. It creates so many deeper levels to conversation. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's worth it because you learn. Knowledge is power, I guess. Knowledge is incredible.
We had an art exhibit opening over the weekend. Andy Grady, the former faculty member, had a chance to meet one of his daughters who's a dual degree graduate or dual major of ceramic art and ceramic engineering. And she went on to work in Bell Labs, get an MBA from Oregon, and got recognized by then President Barack Obama for advancing national security. So she's got an entrepreneurial venture, but she mentioned that her mom actually wrote a book too on female pioneers. So she was going to get the lead, and when I get that, I'll forward it on to you because there may be some opportunities to learn some new stories to add to the field book that you'll be writing.
Excellent, thank you. Right now I'm reading Hannah Arendt, so hopefully that'll be someone I can write about. And she's not particularly from Paris, but if I don't do the book in Paris, I think I'll just do it slowly reading literature by women about women and their lives they lived and just writing about it as they go.
Just before we got here, you mentioned finishing your latest glass piece. Are you happy with how it turned out?
Yeah, and so we did. I was just working with a new grad student from Cyprus, and her name's Anna, and she helped me for 2 hours, bringing me pieces of molten glass that I was then adding onto this sculpted head that had no hair originally, and I made sort of like this crown of antlers or tree branches coming out. And I'm interested because I'm reading Ovid's Metamorphosis which is a rendition of the Greco-Roman tales from about 90 AD is when Ovid wrote it. And a lot of the Italian Renaissance artists were making work based off of his Metamorphosis book. So I've been inspired by it too, but I'm more inspired to make the women in the novel than the men, who are definitely the heroes traditionally, but the women are also very strong in their own way. And so I'm sort of kind of making these renditions of divine faces and heads of women from these tales. Yeah.
And you rewrote it on the side or for a class?
Just on the side.
Okay.
The Hannah Arendt is also very heavy, so the Ovid, it actually kind of balances out with the fantasy of it. So yeah, there's a story about Apollo and Daphne, and Apollo falls in love with Daphne because Cupid wanted to prove that he's powerful, so shot him with the love arrow. And then he shot Daphne with a sort of repulsion arrow, and Daphne runs away. And actually, it's sad, but she decides to become a tree instead of be with Apollo. And I think in some way, that's also a message of itself that could be sort of reclaimed as a woman, which is like, there is always another option. I'm not saying it's great, but I think I'm also just kind of reflecting on that while I'm making this work and integrating the new stuff I've learned from the class into my practice and making these kind of for fun.
Did you journal every day?
I do. It's been necessary ever since I started doing it, because I was 6, my parents divorced, and my teacher said, here's a journal. You should write in this when you're feeling sad. And then I journaled it. Then we moved to South Africa because my mom was on Fulbright, and I journaled a lot there. And I guess that was age 10 because it was 2008. And ever since then, yeah, I've just kind of filled journals with my thoughts and feelings and musings on life, I guess. Starting to have more drawings in them, which is cool.
I questioned, it's been a few years now at Alfred. How have you changed over the last few years?
Gosh, I think the first thing I will think of and I'll say is the idea of community. My idea of community has really expanded and grown. I think growing up in a suburb and even a city, there's this really large feeling of belonging, but it's not so personal as sort of, everybody by name. You see somebody every time you leave your house. And the idea of community has really grown for me in a way that I've learned how to be an active community member and be a good community member, even when I'm sort of struggling on my own, because at one point when I'm struggling, someone will be there to help me up. So I have to be there to help other people up and just give people the benefit of the doubt, forgive and forget, because that's how you keep a strong connected community. And that's in the glass studio, but also the physics studio, physics department, and Alfred as a whole. I think even being for that small time in the fire department, and I lived above the bar, so that's sort of interesting. But I've gotten to see a good amount of Alfred and gotten to know people a lot better than I had before. I think also as far as education goes, I've always felt that it's a real privilege to be able to get an education. But I think the Alfred University system, as well as the faculty in different ways, acknowledge that and want to help you take advantage of that privilege. And if you're passionate about music, you can reach out to the music department or run a radio station, and someone will talk to the music department. You're not going to get turned away. There's so much inclusivity, and I always have felt welcome whenever I wanted to do something new here and take advantage of this time I have here. From 3 years at Alfred, I feel a lot more independent. I feel like I've learned how to think for myself, problem solve, and be creative. I think that the educational program, both in physics and art, has allowed you to they hold your hand for thinking, and then they really kind of let you go, and you have your own time. And I also say the honors program, they're very discussion-based seminar. The classes are very discussion-based and not really as much like a seminar lecture. And those really stimulate thought-provoking conversation and new knowledge has really brought out a lot.
Any favorite honors classes that you've had?
Well, Dr. Myers, bad words, cloud for amazing. Yes, bad words. But it's all the lying is a word bad, that was sort of more important than any word in particular. And some of the students, we had to do a presentation at the end. Some of the students' presentations, I was thinking, she can do this in front of an audience. This is an amazing presentation. And then the one I'm in right now is also really interesting, the art of protest music. And they're challenging, but it's good. It's good to kind of challenge your own thoughts.
The podcast by Angela Lee Duckworth, recently the psychologist at Penn, and she was saying the best mentors are ones that push you, that really cause you to stretch, but at the same time, that they care deeply about you and have the compassion, because all of us run into challenges now and then. So it sounds like you found more than a few people along those lines.
Yeah.
At our university.
Yeah, I definitely think if you have passion or something to give, or even a curiosity, there is someone there to help you and challenge you, but also support you. Really deep.
Any favorite bad word that you brought into?
I think well, so we looked at James Joyce and we looked at Finnegan's Wake. And,
the circular novel.
Yeah, the circular novel, and just reading the whole first page out loud just makes me laugh out loud from my gut. And so if you ever want to read the first page of Finnegan's Wake out loud, it'll be fun.
To do it in college. Mind vendor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for all you do for our community, and we wish you all the best. So you're going to do us immensely proud as an alum of this institution.
Thank you so much for giving me a platform to share my experience and my voice. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.